Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Hope y'all having a great day. And with no further ado, let us get into my AFC South predictions. If you haven't checked out either of my AFC East or North predictions or my NFC East and North predictions, I'll have them linked down in the comments below so you guys can go check that video. Go check those videos out. But with no further ado, let's get into my AFC South predictions. Starting with the Jags, the reigning AFC South champions, who did lose a lot this offseason, but I do think they are still really talented, coached well, and should be a formidable team. I do think they win that first game against the sorry about that, beat the Browns. I do think they lose to Denver um in week 2. I know they won last year in Mile High, but I do think the Broncos are gonna want that revenge, and I think they get it done here. I believe I had New England winning this game. As for some reason it keeps on flying down. I don't know why, but the Jags fall to 1-2 to start. I'm not sure about these last two games because I did pick them, whether at Cincinnati or Philly winning. Um, I'm gonna say the Jags win both of these games. That might not be correct. I might have had them losing both or splitting them, but I do think Jacksonville gets the win in Cincinnati. I do think they will be ready, and I think against an Eagles team that might be trying to figure out this offense early on, the Jags might be able to take care of business in London where they play a lot. They have a lot more experience than these teams they're playing because obviously they play there now twice a year. I think that they get a win there. I do think they win back-to-back games in London to move to 4-2. Um, should be really exciting. Um, against a Houston team that I think is really good, but I do think the Jags, and technically their home game against Houston, gets the win there. Off the bye, I think they beat the Colts. I'm not high on Indy. I think Jacksonville is a better team, and I do think they get the win there. I do think they lose to the Ravens, and what should be an entertaining Thursday night game between these two, and then Jacksonville at Tennessee. I think the Titans will be better this year, and I kind of want to pick Tennessee, but I've kind of picked a lot of home teams. But I do think the Titans do at least split with Jacksonville this upcoming season, which would drop them to what, 5-4. I do think they beat the the Giants to move to 6-4. I think they beat the Titans to split that series 7-4. The Bears game should be fun. I think I had Chicago winning this one, so I'll pick them. I do think the Jags beat the Steelers on Monday night, which should be an entertaining Monday night game. Like I said, I do think Houston splits with them. Dallas, this should be an interesting game. Both teams, I think, by this point, hopefully will be competing in the playoffs and maybe even for their divisions. And I think I had Dallas winning this one, I want to say. I think the Jags do beat Washington at home and then at Indianapolis. I'm going to say the Jags get the win there. To have them finish with a record of 10-7, which, yes, is a worse record from last year. The team did get worse, losing ETN, Lloyd in free agency, but they do have a lot of productive players on this team, and they will give them a high ceiling, I mean, high floor, which should have this team competing in the playoffs. But those are my Jags predictions going 10-7. Houston should be a really good season, especially with this elite defense. And I do think the offense will be better than it has been the last couple of years. I think the Texans definitely have improved this offensive line. The running game should be better. And I do think Houston will be a more productive offense to give more support for this defense. I did have them beating both the Bills and the Bengals at home. I do think they win those first two games, which might seem like a shocker. Mainly, maybe the Bills won, but I feel like week 1, Houston's going to be ready. After that terrible loss to the Pats in the divisional round, I think Houston's going to want to show everybody they are still one of the best teams in the league. And I think one way to do that is to beat a team everybody has as a Super Bowl contender this upcoming year. Houston at Indy. I'm sorry, I'm not very high on the Colts. I definitely think this will be a rough season for Indy. I do think I had them beating Dallas at home to move to 4-0. And then I do think they beat Tennessee 5-0. But their first loss coming to the Jags in London, I do think they beat the Texans to move to 6-1 before the bye, which I mean looking at that schedule, like outside of like a couple sketchy games in the division, and they do play some tough teams, but they are at home, so it's like it's not that tough of a schedule if you think about it. But on to the second half of the season, I think they lose to the Chargers. Should be a fun, entertaining game, but I do think LA gets their gets a bounce back win against a Houston team that's kind of controlled them the last couple of years. I think they beat the Browns. Sorry, Cleveland. I think Houston's defense will smother whoever's at quarterback, and the offense should be able to just do enough to get the win. I do think they sweep Indy, which I know it's controversial to say you sweep a division rival, but I just think the Texans are that much better that like I don't think there's a way you what's the word? I don't think there's a way you can lose to them. I did have the Ravens winning that game, so I think I have them. I do think I had Houston winning at Pittsburgh. At Washington, I'm not sure if I had the Texans winning that game. I mean, I do think Houston's a better team, so I will have them get the win there. I did have them losing to both Philly and Green Bay late in the year, and then finally, I think they also sweep the Titans to finish with a record of 12-5, which same record as last year, but I do think they get off to a better start. And I think they're able to ride that momentum. This defense gives this team a ceiling of at least like 9 wins. And if Houston's offense is like even like slightly better than it has been the last couple of years, the Texans should be a formidable foe. And I think they retake this division, which they nearly won last year. Like they won 12 games. It's just Jacksonville won 13. So it's kind of hard to say Houston was bad last year when the offense was at times bad, but for the most part, Houston's really good and should continue to be great. Remember the Colts, who I am just not very high on. I don't think this team. I think this might be a year where Chris Ballard finally gets fired. Shane Steichen more than likely would go with him. Just because Daniel Jones coming off a torn ACL, is he even going to be the starter week 1? What does this defense look like? Like I know they were able to keep a lot of guys who potentially were going to retire, like Charvarius Ward or DeForest Buckner, but it does this defense now with Sauce Gardner. Are they able to? Are they able to be like? Are they able to keep this team afloat if the offense isn't as great as it was last year early on in the season? Is my big question, because like this defense has talent, same with the offense, but like, are the Colts going to be able to be as good as they were last year, especially with Daniel Jones coming off an injury? And I think the season could end in disaster, kind of like how the Dolphins season, I thought last year, where like entering the year, there were just a lot of question marks on this team, and it ended up being a rough season for Miami, which is why I do think they start off to a brutal 0-3 start. They do have 2 home games in that span and could possibly get these wins, but I just think the Ravens and Texans are better, more sound, and who knows if Daniel Jones or Anthony Richardson or Riley Leonard will be the quarterback week one. I forget if I had the Commanders winning this game, but I didn't think Indy gets this win. I think they lose to Pittsburgh, beat Tennessee, lose to Minnesota. I do think they'll beat the Cowboys in week nine. To sit at, what is that? 3-6 through their first 9 games. Could be, they could win, a couple of these other games, like maybe Houston, Baltimore. Maybe they pull off a win against the Chiefs. Mahomes, is he going to be 100%? Maybe they beat the Steelers or the Vikings. But it's a tough stretch. And in my opinion, the Colts just have a lot of holes that definitely could lead to this team not having a great start and eventually moving on from Ballard and Steichen after the season. I do think they beat the Dolphins. Should be better than them. And I think they beat the Giants. Which would actually put them at, I think, 6-6 before their bye week. So, or would it be 6-6? That would be 5-7, 5-7 before their bye week, which should be an interesting season. I think they lose to Philly, Tennessee. I think I had them losing to the Bengals, but I do think they beat the Browns, finishing with a record of 6-11, which is very much a disappointing season for a Colts team that believes they can compete in the AFC, and maybe they can. I just am not very high on this team. I think the question marks with who's going to be starting at quarterback early on, was last year, especially early on in the season, a flash in the pan, especially once teams started to be able to shut down Jonathan Taylor. The Colts weren't able to find much success, and they started to lose, more games, and Daniel Jones was more turnover prone. And then this defense, I know they dealt with a lot of injuries last year, but, will they be able to sustain the amount of success needed for this Indianapolis offense to be able to eventually find its second gear? We'll just have to see, but I do think it'll be a disappointing season for the Colts, and it might lead to some firings or mid-season or probably after the season if this is how it goes. But under the Titans, which they have a brutal schedule, but I do believe in Robert Saleh, Brian Daboll, Cam Ward, and this Tennessee team. I think they get off to a good start with a week one win. Do think they lose to the Eagles in week two and the Giants and Ravens, which tough losses, but it's a really tough schedule. But Tennessee, I think, will be competitive. They will definitely be much improved from the last couple of years. I think they beat the Browns, but lose to Cincinnati to go 2-6 before their bye week, which, with how brutal the schedule is, it might be good. Maybe they win. Maybe they beat the Giants. Maybe they beat the Colts. They could beat Cincinnati, and get some extra wins, but a tough stretch early on. Moving on to the second half of the schedule, have them splitting with Jacksonville and the rest of their division. Or no, that Houston sweeps. Never mind. I think they lose to Dallas. I think I had Washington winning this game, so I am going to try to at least keep these games somewhat the same from my previous predictions to make these full predictions make more sense. I think they lose to the Lions. I do think they beat the Raiders in Vegas. I think not high on Vegas. I think this definitely could be a very, very long rebuild. And I think they lose to the Steelers, which would have them going 5-12, an improvement from last year only by a game. It's a very tough schedule for Tennessee, despite being in last place. It's a really tough schedule, but I do think we'll see this team much better coached, play much better both offensively and defensively, and I think we'll see Tennessee be more cohesive throughout the season, and we're not going to see, the stuff we saw under Brian Callahan. And hopefully, Robert Saleh can get this team back on track to where Mike Vrabel had this team as a competitive team that can compete not just in the AFC South, but in the entire AFC. And I think they have players on this roster to do that. They just need to find, more excellent players to continue to improve this roster to where they're not sitting at the bottom, finishing with top 10 picks every year. But yeah, these are my AFC South predictions. I think Houston goes 12-5, wins this division for the third year in 4 years, which is crazy to say that, given how bad Houston was early in the 2020s. To say that they could win their third division title in 4 years, a fourth consecutive playoff appearance if they were to make it this year. It's kind of crazy. I do think Jacksonville is slightly on the bubble. I think New England would technically have a tiebreaker since they beat them, or I had them beating them. But 10-7 is still a really good record. Definitely can put them in the playoff mix. Indy, I think this is going to be a lost season where the team finally realizes that they should have fired Ballard a long time ago because the decisions he's made about this roster have clearly hurt this team. And I think Indy could be in for a rough season where everything just goes bad. And then Tennessee, I think, will be improved. I think they definitely could make some noise and really compete in this division, but it's still a long ways to go. But I think this is how the AFC South stacks up. 2 playoff teams at least. Maybe Indy, maybe I'm low on Indy and the Colts somehow are able to make like a impressive run and they're the second team in the playoffs. Who knows? Maybe they win this division and they prove me wrong. But right now I think the Colts finish below 500 and out of the playoff race, maybe into November or at least December. But that'll do it for today's video. Hope you guys enjoy it. Let me know down in the comments your AFC South predictions and maybe your predictions for this upcoming NFL season or college football season. So let me know down in the comments. Hope you guys like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you get notified every time a video comes out. Check me out on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and I'll check you guys next week where I'll have some more predictions for the NFL along with my college football playoff predictions and a way too early mock draft with the college football season starting next Saturday. So hope you guys watch those videos, enjoy the content I make, and until next time, hope you guys have a great day, and bye.